So overall it seems that Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning was well liked. But even if that movie didn't quite work for you, and you were saying things like a fumbled first hour, or too much exposition, then at least the one thing everyone seems to agree on is that the submarine scene is pretty good. And yeah, sure, I agree, it is pretty good, it's okay. But there's one key reason that prevents it from being great, I think, and it's a writing issue. Now let's get into it. Tom Cruise entered the submarine at the 1 hour and 34 mark, and he saved at 1 hour 47. Grace? Maybe pull him out of the water first? So that's 13 minutes of submarine exploration for Ethan Hunt. But before we get into the main writing problem here, let's establish a baseline. So that scene follows the familiar and very efficient pattern of the escalation. Or I guess you could call it Hollywood's Murphy's Law, that everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and always at the worst moment. So just for a quick refresher on this concept, let's take the jump through the storm in Fallout as a template. So on paper the scene could simply be there's a plane, and Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill have parachutes, and they jump and they land on the roof of the Grand Palais. But then it is the writer's job to ask themselves, how can I extract more juice from the scene? And in the case of an action movie, elevating a scene often means making it more exciting. So the juice here isn't going to be the act of jumping in itself, but in all the things that will get worse and worse until the heroes finally make it to the other side. So what could go wrong then? Well, it's not just a standard jump, right? There's a huge storm, like Wrath of God's level. So they have to cancel the jump. But there's a rivalry between Cruise's Ethan Hunt and Cavill's Walker, so let's use that as the catalyst for the second thing that goes wrong.
Walker, we got a problem. There's a storm and we need to...
And already wow, it's such an efficient way of communicating that the hero is reluctantly throwing himself into danger. Okay, but what could go wrong now? Well, there's a storm, right? And it's not just for decoration. So lightning strikes on our heroes. Ethan is fine, but not Walker. What follows is an absolutely epic dive above Paris, as Ethan tries to reach Walker before they hit the ground, with the altitude working as a countdown.
Altitude, 15,000 feet.
And still, let's make it worse. Ethan dives past Walker. And when he finally catches him, they go in a tumble. Then comes the time to finally relieve the pressure, and nothing more goes wrong, except of course the heroes escape at the last possible second. So do you know this game where you have to go as close to the line as possible, but without going over it? Well, writing the escalation is kind of like that. You need to push the situation to its extreme, but if you go too far, let's imagine that in Fallout you get a bit overexcited in writing the scene and you make Tom Cruise actually hit the ground.
You thinking what I'm thinking, partner? Aim for the bushes.
But then you're gonna have some difficulty recovering from that as a writer, because you need Ethan Hunt to be alive for the rest of the movie. And so just right off the bat, let me say that one of the problems I think with the submarine scene is that it does go over the line. But that's not the main problem, because after all this is Mission Impossible, so having our characters do impossible things is not necessarily a killer. I think it's in the way the movie goes over the line that it really hurts itself. Let me try to explain what I mean. Like the Fallout jump was not just a dive above Paris, this one is not just a dive into an abandoned Russian submarine. It's in the middle of a frozen sea. It's a dive that requires Ethan to go down
500 feet.
with a suit that's only tested to
300 feet.
And there's not one scene to explain how dangerous the pressure will be, but two. And then he will somehow need to get out through the cover of ice, where his team will find him and put him in a decompression chamber. And for that purpose, they give Ethan Hunt a tracker that will help his team locate him.
Within a 2-mile radius.
But 2 miles is insane, and it's a radius, which means a 4 miles diameter, or 6.4 kilometers if you want to use a real metric. That's an area of over 32 square kilometers, or 12.5 square miles. I mean, imagine you're Grace and you're on a football stadium covered in ice, and you know that Ethan Hunt will pop up somewhere under the ice, but it could be anywhere under the surface of the stadium. And once he's here, you'll just have a few seconds to save him from dying of cold and lack of air and depressurization. Okay, that already feels a bit daunting, right? Now imagine the area you have to cover is not just a football stadium, but 100 times a football stadium. Oh wait, no, actually it's 5,000 times the area of a football field. Yeah, that's about the half of Manhattan. So it's Grace's job to somehow find Ethan in a few seconds, even though he's under the ice, then dig a hole in the ice and finally put him in the decompression chamber. So yeah, good luck, Grace. Thoughts and prayers. The other option, of course, would be for Ethan to dig through the ice by himself. At this point in the movie, it's still an option for the writers. The movie has worked very hard to escalate the difficulty of this submarine dive before Ethan even opens the door. And to be honest, I mean, so far so good. I'm really curious to know how Grace is going to find Ethan despite this amazing challenge. And I'm also curious to know how Ethan is going to manage going back up despite having a suit that's not tested to this depth, and also how he's going to deal with the freezing temperature. And then, of course, the writers also leverage the usual Murphy's Law once Ethan is inside the submarine. And for the most part, it's pretty good. So Ethan, by entering the chambers, he's gonna displace water from one room to the next, which then provokes the submarine to roll on the seafloor. So what else could go wrong? Well, actually the submarine's at the edge of a cliff and threatens to fall deeper. Then there's a natural escalation that comes from that, which is that because of the rotation, it kind of messed up the torpedoes, which are now all over the place, and one of them is blocking Ethan's exit. So now Ethan is trapped into the submarine. One even falls on our hero and threatens to pin him. Soon he realizes that he won't be able to open the door, and he goes to a torpedo passway instead. This is really good, it's a creative solution to his problem. Further escalation is that he has to remove his suit to make it through. So water at 500 feet into the Bering Sea is barely above freezing. And now we are approaching the point where I think there's a big problem. So Ethan does go out through the torpedo tube, but once outside something terrible happens, which is that the submarine starts falling off the cliff. And keep in mind, Ethan at this point is already 200 feet below the 300 feet supposed limit of his suit. And to make things even worse, he's attached to the submarine, so right now we are at the extreme of Murphy's Law, where the situation will not get worse for the hero. This is his lowest point, and now the whole question is, how is he going to recover from that? And so the solution that he goes for is that he cuts himself away from the submarine, but doing so he has to let go of his breathing apparatus. So the writer has really pushed Ethan to the absolute extreme, where basically he's dead. He's dead. There is no way he makes it out alive with all that has been explained to us throughout the course of the movie. And then Ethan just kind of swam up, and Grace just kind of found him, and she put him in the decompression chamber, and he was fine. From a storytelling perspective, the problem here is actually not that it's unrealistic. I mean, it is completely unrealistic, right? The world record for freediving is slightly above 100 meters at 338 feet, which is up and down, so he actually had to swim about 650 feet. And I think it's fair to say that at this point, Ethan is well below 650 feet, and also it's in freezing water, and also is starting from twice the depth. So here, the performance that Ethan Hunt achieves is actually far more impressive than the world record. But fine, no one really cares, I mean, that's Mission Impossible. The real problem here is that by allowing Ethan to survive so easily, the movie undermines itself. There are several ways that an action movie can get away with showing unrealistic stuff on the screen. And the first is to own up to their campiness. If the audience knows that they are watching dumb fun, then they are not gonna be counting the feet here. They are just happy to see a cool sequence. The thing is that this movie is making a concerted effort to be very serious. We have all these long explanations about pressure, about HPNS, and this grounds the movie in realism and away from campiness. So there is a tonal mismatch here. The other way that an action movie can get away with anything is the rule of cool. You know, it's this idea that the audience will forgive just about anything, as long as what's put on the screen is just cool enough to justify its existence. And the submarine scene actually uses that a lot. You don't see anyone complaining about the fact that it's a coincidence that the submarine is so close to the cliff, or that Ethan should have died at this point, you know, because it's just cool to see. But you know what's not really cool? Well, just swimming up without any additional idea. Just making Ethan simply strong enough that he can actually survive that. They still try to rule of cool this moment by showing us pretty images, but it's not good enough from a story perspective. For example, you know, Ethan was supposed to breathe everything out, so he should not be floating up at this point, but sinking down. I don't really care about that actually, but then the thing is that the movie is the one asking me to care about it. They literally have a character say,
"Don't forget, you must exhale continuously as you rise to the surface. Hold your breath, and your lungs will explode."
So they are the ones bringing attention to their own inconsistencies. And so yeah, the rule of cool here is weak, because swimming up is not a creative solution. To be honest, like if you look back on the history of Mission Impossible movies, then there is that pattern of coming up with ridiculous solutions, but that at least gives something for the audience to believe in. Like for example in the third movie, when he has a bomb in the brain that's gonna explode, it doesn't really make sense that electrocuting himself would disengage the bomb, and anyway, even if it worked, it would still fry his brain. But Ethan Hunt is just able to shake it off, and overall, I mean, I'm not saying the scene is great, but it's fine. And here I think something like that is missing in the submarine scene. Just give us something to believe that Ethan Hunt actually was able to swim up. But I can see why they could not really come up with a solution, because for example, if he found some motorized way to go up, then there would still be the pressure problem that would actually be even worse because he's going up too fast. So they really wrote themselves in a corner here, where he cannot breathe, but at the same time he cannot go up to the surface too quickly. And so that's why, unfortunately, I think they had no other option than just to say, and then he swam up. So not only does the movie waste a lot of time on this exposition, it actually ends up being worse than useless. It's harmful. And it's really frustrating because it could have been avoided so easily. Like, why even mention the 2-mile radius? Just say nothing and let the audience assume that it's gonna give his exact position. Or better yet, just don't give any tracker to Ethan at all and make use of those goddamn coordinates that you spend so much time talking about. If Grace had the coordinates of the submarine, then she would have a good chance at finding Ethan. And wait, she does have the coordinates. Well, okay, fine, so then Grace finding Ethan is technically not a plot hole. But it still leaves the question of why would the movie willingly drown itself in so much exposition that ends up being useless and confusing? I think the intention was to show how precarious the situation was and to raise the stakes. But unfortunately, it only serves to bring attention to the fact that the plan was really half-baked, and the movie itself does not really behave as if Grace knew the coordinates, because if that was the case, then there would be a hole already in the ice, and Grace would already be waiting for him. But that's not what we actually see on the screen. In the end, I mean, I'm pretty sure that half the people seeing the movie are assuming that she found him thanks to the tracker. And all of this is because we actually do not see the conflict of Grace looking for Ethan and growing desperate as she doesn't find him. It's like all this exposition is just building up to a scene that we actually never get to see. And why mention the 300 and the 500 feet if the depth ends up being meaningless anyway? I mean, just say nothing and let the audience assume that the depth is whatever it is for Ethan to barely make it out. So in the end, the movie does not elevate Ethan Hunt as much as it humiliates those who had offered their warning.
Exactly what kind of gases are we talking about?
That's classified.
Alright, enough. And after talking so much about submarines, I think it's my civic duty as a Frenchman to mention this movie, The Wolf's Call, Le Chant du Loup, which is kind of a rarity because it's a French thriller that's actually good. So yeah, I thought I should name drop it. And thanks for watching and see you next time.